So, welcome, David. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Kristie.
We use the podcast just to educate people on different professions. I have myself knee deep in agriculture, so I feel like every time I talk about it, it's kind of a deer in the headlights if they don't know anything about agriculture. So I thought this would be a great way to introduce it and just kind of give someone who is zero familiar with container farming or have no clue what that even is, just kind of give them an intro of what that might be.
Absolutely. Um, so then, just to get started, container farming is a fairly new industry. It kind of arose from the need for controlled environment agriculture and the increase in popularity of it. So, controlled environment agriculture is essentially indoor cultivation, plant cultivation, where you control basically all of the environmental variables. So you control the air temperature, the humidity, the CO2 levels, even. And then in our case, in a lot of hydroponic situations, you're also controlling the water parameters as well. So that's the pH of the water, the temperature of the water, the nutrient levels of the water as well. So basically, taking as many variables out of the growing process as possible. And container farming basically looked at the world that we have today and said, what is the most popular, available, and applicable shell? Basically what is the easiest way to make this happen on a commercial scale. And shipping containers, our entire world, believe it or not, is actually kind of structured around shipping containers. So you see these chassis, these 40-foot trucks that can go everywhere. They are a standardized size. They fit on every single transatlantic ship that you can think of. um, a lot of our infrastructure is really built around the shipping container as this kind of modularized unit. So it made a lot of sense. And I think our company, Freight Farms, was started back in 2011. I want to say it was officially founded by John Friedman and Brad McNamara. And we produced the first prototype unit in 2013. And from there, we've iterated and designed a lot of different types of units, all with the goal in mind of making basically growing food, democratizing that and making it available to anybody that wants to do it, making it as simple as possible, and also giving you the greatest amount of control. So now we are on our latest iteration of the farm, which is called the Greenery S, and it is leaps and bounds further along than anything we've ever produced before, and we're really proud of it.
Yes, so I got to see the Greenery S. That's the one that you guys have there at the headquarters. Now, how many countries would you say you guys have touched on so far as Freight Farm?
Ooh, um,
And I
over
know,
40.
yeah, I was going to say, I know it's extensive, so I hate to put you on the spot like that. I knew it was a lot. And I mean, I've been following you guys and kind of stalking you guys on Instagram. There's Freight Farm. I have friends that are from Egypt that have family in Egypt. So I had seen one in Egypt and I sent it to all of them. I was like, look. So I
Mhm.
just thought that was really cool. What's probably one of your, I'm sure that's probably one of your warmest climates. What do you think one of your warmest climates is that has a freight farm to be able to sustain their own produce?
So there are a lot of warm places that these go. I do a little bit of stalking myself. I look at our as part of previously being on the support team. My role was to support customers in the field, so I would often look at their readings, their temperature readings, and I believe the hottest I ever saw with my own eyes was in Kuwait, 120 degrees Fahrenheit outside. So that was really, really hot. But that is a very dry climate as well. So desert style climate. But then we also have very, very hot and humid climates as well that these units run in. So a lot of the Caribbean islands where it can get well over 100 degrees, but then the humidity can climb up to 90+% as well.
Yeah.
So a really wide variety, but some really, really hot places.
While I was growing up, my grandmother's actually from Mexico. And my grandpa, and my eight aunts and uncles, and my dad migrated from Mexico up to Oregon when they were very young. and she was a laborer on a berry picking farm. So from a very young age, we've been kind of engulfed in agriculture, and it's kind of fun to see it like come full circle. I've talked to someone else who we were talking about things that we did when we were younger, and it's just kind of crazy to think that we were involved so young, and then now we're back where we started a little bit. I've been talking to my dad about it, and he's like, "It's so wild." Do you feel like you had experience when you were younger that influenced kind of where you are now for work and your career in agriculture?
Definitely. And um, really interesting to hear your background as well and see kind of all the different sides of agriculture that have influenced you. From the entrepreneurial side of actually starting a business around a freight farm, plus having the background of your grandmother actually working on a farm as well. Um, for me, it's somewhat similar, but also it's a little dissimilar as well. My grandfather was a farmer in Michigan. He recently passed away, but he was farming well into his 70s, mostly commodity crops, so corn and soybeans. But that was his livelihood his entire life. I remember going there as a kid, spending some time on some tractors, in barns, etc. Um, and then I did grow up briefly on I wouldn't call it a farm necessarily, but there was definitely a large piece of land in West Virginia for a couple of years. Um, at some point in my life, kind of the formative years of my life between about 12 and 18. And that really left its impact on me as well. And then more recently, my brother and I started a small agriculture company as well, produce company. And that was kind of the full circle, very similar to what you described.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things I found has been a consistency in interviews with people is that they kind of have this implementation of whatever they, ended up now in their grown up life, had some focus on it as a child or introduction. So we always talk about how those things kind of stick with you. So that's fun to see how yours also was kind of similar to that. Have you guys had, I saw when I was there that there were some cool things that you guys were growing in the greenery as I'm trying to think one of them that I was really excited about was the hops. And it looked
Hmm.
like someone was just, I don't know who that was, but I was like, "Hey, what is this?" And we were all laughing that we were focusing on the lettuce and I find this one plant in the back. Um, but I thought that was very innovative. Have you had any other innovative ideas come up like that you've seen where someone's trying to grow something that maybe is not so common or experienced?
Yes, lots of times. So just to so your listeners know, we have 300 to 400 of these units out there in the world, all around the world. So as you can imagine, everybody uses them a little bit differently. So we have as far as experimental crops grow, I've seen strawberries, tomatoes, cucumbers, some root vegetables as well. So turnips and radishes are fairly common, but also carrots. We've seen hemp and cannabis grown as well. Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything. Hops, of course. Those are some ones that we're actually running some tests on now. Um, I like to tell people you can grow anything in a freight farm. You could grow oak trees if you wanted to, but really what it comes down to is it economically viable? And when you take that part out of the equation, and let's say you're either a nonprofit or you are let's say you're even a small business farmer, but you want to dedicate just a little bit of your space to just pure R&D, the opportunities are endless, really. And
They
it's
really
really
are.
cool to see. It really is, and it's like you said. Your point about the educational benefits of a freight farm. Um, you know, when you were talking about the New York City public schools, is really one of the coolest aspects of it too, because you get to see a plant develop from seed all the way through to harvest, and that process of watching plants grow and understanding the nutritional needs and just watching how they respond to different environmental conditions is really interesting. even if you don't necessarily know everything that's going on, just watching and kind of putting together these patterns and recognizing um, little things along the way, like, oh, wow, I didn't see that leaf there yesterday. Interesting. Now it's there. How did that happen? Right. And then 2 days later, it's like, oh, now there are four more leaves. Wow, this is growing exponentially. Those little findings, that kind of insights that you gain along the way, are just so interesting and rewarding. So for even
Very
for whether
rewarding.
it's for children
Yes.
or adults, it's equally rewarding. I'd say the best story that I have about a freight farm that really kind of like made me understand the benefits of it in the real world, where I was working with a gentleman who I had been in touch with quite a bit, and then sort of suddenly just kind of fell off the map. He stopped responding, and this was right around Christmas time, a couple years ago, maybe 2017, and so he just didn't respond for multiple weeks, and then right around probably mid January or so, he did write me back finally, and he had had a heart attack, a massive heart attack on Christmas Day.
Oh my gosh.
Um, and it put him in the hospital, obviously. And he was in there recovering over Christmas and New Year's, um, and then finally was out of the hospital about the second week of January, and he was running a farm at the time, and he told me I went back to my farm for the first time in 3 weeks, and at this point he really didn't have a partner at the time. He was running it by himself, so he didn't have anyone to check in on it, and he expected to walk into a container full of dead plants essentially. And he opened the door and he walked in and he said, David, those were some huge, healthy heads of lettuce that I walked into. It was like I had never, it's like nothing had ever happened. Like I just left it to run, and I came in 3 weeks later and the produce looked amazing.
That is
And
amazing story. I feel so good even hearing that.
that was probably one of my favorite stories forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having
Okay,
me,
bye-bye.
Kristie.